Wilburn. She's a graduate of Boston University and earned both her master's degree and doctorate of health science from the University of Indianapolis. Additionally, she holds a certificate in change leadership from Cornell University. Dr. Wilburn currently serves on the board of directors for the American Occupational Therapy Association, Hope Academy Recovery High School, and Reach for Youth. She made history by becoming the youngest first-generation Latina to be awarded Fellow of the American Occupational Therapy Association, which is her profession's highest honor of distinction. She was recognized as Occupational Therapist of the Year in 2018 and inducted into the Indiana Latino Leadership Circle in 2020. In 2021, she was awarded Boston University's Alumni Association Special Recognition Award for outstanding contributions to humanity beyond professional responsibility. She was named Outstanding Woman Leader from the Indiana University and Purdue University Indianapolis Office of Women. She was selected as part of Hoosier Women Forward, a democratic preparation program for women, fourth class. She is committed to educational equity, public health, and running a positive campaign for Indiana House District 32. It is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Dr. Victoria Grace Wilburn.
Hello, it is so great to be with you all. Brandy, I think I want you to introduce me every time I speak because your voice is just beautiful and powerful and Southern, and I love it. So great to be with you all today. Thank you for this invitation, and thank you for the warm introduction. Just a quick correction. My name is Victoria Garcia Wilburn, and so I use my maiden name, Garcia. And just that so much of actually what we're about to embark on today is our identities and stories and storytelling and how we come from, where we are and why we are where we are really is dependent upon how we view ourselves and how we have perceived ourselves and the stories in which we are told throughout our lives. So I will go ahead and share my screen because I am an educator and PowerPoints keep me on target. So grateful to be here again. This template really spoke to me. The color green really spoke to me because it really signifies growth. And we are all on our own individual journey of growth. And oftentimes I find when I stumble, when I kind of hit a rock on the pathway or can't see a curb that I'm about to trip over, it's because I'm not looking at directly what's in front of me. I'm looking left, I'm looking right. I'm wondering why things aren't happening as fast or wondering these days why things are happening so fast. And really my talk today is about what I'm calling the 3 V's. So Victoria is not the first V. The first V is our vision. So we'll go over elements of using your own personal story and how that can really help you connect with professionals, help you connect with groups outside of your own profession, and really help you to market yourself in a way that can resonate among the common threads that we have in humanity. So back to our 3 V's. Vision, value, and vulnerability. So 3 words that we probably have been hearing a lot lately, particularly the vulnerability space and the great work that Brene Brown has done to really lead us there. This take is going to be particularly around storytelling. So I'm excited to dive into these 3 with you. The quotes that you see today are my own, so feel free to take a snapshot of them and give me some credit where credit is due. But these are just musings from my own journey. So the importance of your vision. So I truly believe that the clearer that we see ourselves, the more clear that we can see the world and where we're supposed to be in that world. And where that really comes from for me is my time as a little girl. I was reared by my grandmother. My mother was a boss mom. She was a first generation, I'm going to say hairstylist. So she was the first in her family to actually go to high school and obtain her cosmetology diploma. And that was the first degree that I ever saw hanging up in my home. And so while she was building her own small business and became quite successful, I came 10 years later in the family line and the lineage. And so I was this wonderful surprise, or, maybe mistake, if you will, but we know that there are no mistakes in life. And so she was entering her 40s, having this very successful career and really wanting to go and to maintain those businesses. And so my grandmother really was my primary caregiver from the times of when I was a small infant to about 5 years old. And my grandma had this wonderful way about herself in really appreciating the mundane of life. And so we had a routine of, and this sounds very Southern, Brandy, so you might appreciate this, of taking a tall glass of cold iced tea and going out into the back porch. And as a child, I didn't really realize how difficult that was. We are often so busy with the next thing and the next goal and the next award and the next accomplishment that we forget that really next is right now. And so what she taught me in that moment is to really fix our gaze, enjoy the stillness of the world, and understand that the vision that is inside of us is unique to us. There is no other person on this planet that has the same vision as you, not one, because we all are shaped with different life experiences. We all have different struggles. We all have different high points in our lives, and our social networks are very different. So in that whole cliche, you are unique and you are special, it's actually quite true. You are. So the vision that you have for yourself belongs to you, and you know how to get there if we allow ourselves to see the landscape before us. So I just appreciated going through that practice with her. We would sit for about 10, 15 minutes and rock on the swing and the patio swing. And then we would get our hands dirty in the dirt because my grandmother was a gardener. And so that takes me to our next V, the value. So there's value in the dirty parts of our lives, the parts that we want to sweep under the rug and pretend nobody can see, and the ones that don't end up on the CV or the list of accomplishments. But there's value in that mud and that dirt. And why I say there's value is because there are no missteps on the journey. You heard me say sometimes I stumble, even sometimes I might fall, but I will get up and I will reflect about what I learned through that process. Sometimes when I fall, I'm down for a long time. And that tells me that I need to rest, right? So making these points in our lives in which we feel are muddy or confusing, and really recognizing that there's value in that. We all know that the dirtier the mud, the more that we till it and get it all nutrient rich and give it more oxygen, the better the plants grow. That's what my grandmother taught me. The roses are much more beautiful when the soil is well tilled. So I really, if you're not participating in a reflective practice, whether it's journaling, whether it's meditating, for some of you, you might call it prayer. Now we call it mindfulness. You can't hear what the message is through the mud. So make that part of your daily routine, make that part of your daily practice. And soon, before you know it, the story of your life will start to unfold. You'll go back and look at the pages of your journal and you'll say, oh my word, I wish I had that promotion. I need that promotion. I need this next job. And then the next page, I didn't get the job. I don't know what's ahead. And then the next page, I found exactly where I'm supposed to be working. And I'm so thankful I didn't take that job that I thought that I really needed. So all of that muddiness leads us to our last V, that vulnerability, right? So our vulnerability in life can be tricky. We start to say things like, be real. I just need you to be your authentic self. Come to me in all of your beauty and glory. But that's the gift, right? So our authentic vulnerability is really for a small group of intimate people. The most realness of us belongs to a very small circle of people that we love, that have been on this journey with us, that know the details of our story. But when we're positioning ourselves professionally, we can still be real and authentic, but recognize that we are multifaceted. We are not one-dimensional. There is not one version of any one of us. The way that I am in the classroom looks very different than the way that I am in the boardroom, looks very different than the way that I am on the campaign trail. And it doesn't mean that I'm not being authentic. It's understanding the audience. What stories and what elements of myself does this audience need to hear? And when we see that messaging, that vulnerability, that sharing of those details that are appropriate across settings and dynamics and the multifacetedness of who we are, then we see each other's humanity, right? So opening up with you into that story of my grandmother's front porch really puts us all on the same page. We all were reared by somebody, and maybe it wasn't our parents, or maybe it wasn't our grandparents, maybe it was a special teacher or a caregiver or a sibling that took time to really spend time with us. And so that put us all in a commonality. While I was just telling you that story, you were thinking and having your own memories and your own thoughts and your own warm fuzzies. And then when I started talking about the tilling and the mud and the dirty, that hard obstacle, that came to all of us, right? So we can message and resonate with the commonalities that make us human. I love the analogy about the sequoia trees. Have any of you heard the analogy of the sequoia trees before? Anybody? So ancestral roots, I come from the two, I think, the most greatest places in the world, Spain and Mexico, which give us this indigenous beauty, which is, portions of the United States. So our heritage and my lineage is actually native in the Aztec tribe. And we really believe in the oneness and the unity of the world. Sequoias can teach us something so amazing. So they are large, very large, monstrous trees that take decades, lifetimes to get to their full maturity. But they start out as a very, very, very small seed that's scattered throughout. And the reason why they start off so small is because the sequoias, actually, the way in which they continue to grow is that they have to keep breaking. And in that break, they start to then build and bind. And as they're binding, they get stronger. And what makes sequoias the strongest in their journey is the burning, is the fires that sometimes they have to undergo and endure. And those fires actually allow them to get the parts of themselves that aren't needed so that they can really focus on the nutrients and the restorative process of continuing to grow to their magnitude. We're not that much different than the sequoias. It's the burning. It's the needing, the oneness of all of us. We can't just by one seed grow. We need relationships. We need tribes. We need small circles. We need family in order to reach our full potential. So that when those times of the burn do come, we're all in it together in a very unique way. So I look to nature in those times to make sure that I'm trajectorying this life just not in a oneness, because sometimes if I'm too busy and the hurriedness comes and the muddiness won't go away, I do what we all tend to do, and we get more insular and more insular. And actually what we need to do is grow outward and see that we're all really connected by each other and for each other. And so I love that analogy that the sequoias do connect us to the world. This has been such a lovely time to be with all of you today. I hope that parts of my story resonated with you. I hope that you'll take just an ounce of maybe what you heard today, allow yourself to reflect upon it, and then decide what it means to you. Because the messaging, the part that stood out to each one of us is different. I can guarantee that. I would love to see if any of you feel brave enough to just quickly put in the chat, what was one word or what was one message that resonated with you? And let's see if we have any that might be the same. It's, it's my pleasure to share parts of my personal self with you all today. And please do stay connected with me. I'd love to be a part of your journey. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Garcia Wilburn, for being with us today and sharing your story with our attendees. I can tell you what resonated with me. I loved the value of the dirt and the mud. You know, we're all well served to remember and appreciate the struggles for what they can teach us, seeing the good in it. So I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, before we move into our keynote, it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Dr. Iris Lafferty, who's going to introduce our keynote speaker today. Dr. Lafferty is currently the Senior Vice Provost of Academic Affairs for the University of Arizona Global Campus. She has led this organization boldly, fearlessly, and successfully through countless twists and turns over the last decade, serving in numerous roles, including Associate Vice President of Academic Services, Executive Dean of the College of Doctoral Studies, and Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. She's committed to helping students embrace the transformative power of education. She strengthens and empowers those around her, and she exemplifies what it means to be a true leader. We're grateful for her support, and we are honored to have her here with us today. Dr. Lafferty, the floor is yours.
Brandy, thank you so much. And what a generous introduction. If anything, I'm really embracing the fact that I'm here to serve our students and our faculty. And I'm so grateful for this moment and opportunity to introduce our speaker. Before I get exactly there, I want to welcome everybody and thank everyone for taking part of day 2 of the Forbes School of Business and Technology's Center for Women's Leadership Summit here at the University of Arizona Global Campus. That lots of names, and the meaning is truly resonant there. We are a family within a family within a family. So we're really grateful for everybody's presence and for celebrating our 3rd year as a center. And we certainly could not do this event, this outreach, this public service and contribution toward lifelong learning without your support and without the I have to say, the brains and the mentorship of many here. I won't be able to name everybody. I see Brandy here. I see Misty. I know Aubrey's been in communication with me, noting Bill and Don Fry. Just thank you. I love our Forbes family. I'm actually joining everyone from the University of Arizona's global campus here at Chandler. Several folks from the leadership teams, our cabinet members, folks from the provost's office and our deans are working together to hone in on our own individual and organizational leadership skills. As part of our conversation, the meeting I'm attending, the quote from our CIO, Tom Bourgeois, really has been resonating with me, and it is consistent with the conversations that I'm hearing here at CWL. He has said, interaction creates reality from possibility. And as true to him, it is a deep way of thinking. I translate this for myself as a woman, as a leader, as a learner. I often think about how my words and my behavior can either be a barrier or a blessing to my colleagues and those around me. And so similarly, I hear other women and leaders conflicted about being able to bring the clarity of their true selves. We just heard that from our last speaker, bringing those thoughts to the table. And sometimes it rocks us, it rocks our confidence as individuals and the ability to speak up and step out. Sometimes it also robs others of great ideas and opportunities. And so as such, I'm really excited to have Tissa Richards host our keynote session today. Tissa has a mission to create a legion of leaders with an unshakable sense of self. She is a keynote speaker, an executive coach, a corporate facilitator who works with F1000 and hyperscale organizations. She is guiding these teams to create blueprints for individual and organizational success. She's developing high performance cultures and diversifying C-suites and corporate boardrooms. Tissa, you're a mover and a shaker. I see it already. And as a repeat software founder and CEO, Tissa sits at the intersection of entrepreneurship, fundraising, and executive leadership. She has raised millions of dollars for her companies, won awards for innovation and products, and holds multiple patents for complex cybersecurity software. Please, please join me in welcoming Tissa Richards as she shares with us how to stomp out self-doubt. Thank you, Tissa.
Thank you, Iris. I really appreciate that very generous and warm welcome. And it is, just want to say how exciting it is to see everybody's faces. There's some people here who I recognize, and it just makes my day to see you all. So thank you very much. What I want to start with today is a series of scenarios for you to just imagine. And I want to put those in your brain so you can think about them. And then we're going to come back to them over the course of the next hour and a half, hour really. So imagine being publicly fired by a celebrity CEO, let's say Mark Zuckerberg, Richard Branson, or Larry Ellison, in a very, very humiliating way. And then imagine that you have to relive that humiliation and that pain when you're asked about it again and again and again, whenever you go to interview for a job or just have drinks with your friends and catch up with people. Imagine that your leadership is so impressive to people that you get invited to be in a book. And then when you read the chapter about yourself, you're so overcome with self-doubt that you call the author and the editors and you say, I'm sorry, but you have to take me out. I can't do it. Imagine that you're on a fast track to leadership in a big organization, but you're paralyzed by fear when you have to speak in front of people. This is a really common fear. But your fear is so big that you have to find a garbage can on your way into every meeting room so you can throw up into it. And if there's no garbage can, you throw up into your purse. Or imagine working hard to secure an amazing executive job and then finding out that your original offer was half of what the industry standard for that role should be. And imagine being too speak up about it in case that job opportunity disappears. You don't have to imagine any of those scenarios because they are all real. And each of them happened to different executives that I coach. And in each of those cases, we had to ask some real hard-hitting questions. What value do you bring to this situation? What are your values and your non-negotiables that you operate on that we're going to call into play to make some decisions here? And then how are we going to show up and deal with this situation so that we optimize the outcome for you? And so the arc of today's keynote is really going to speak to the mission of my company, which Iris mentioned, which is to create a legion of leaders with an unshakable sense of self. And I want to talk very, very explicitly about the benefits that come your way when you have that unshakable sense of self. So you're going to notice I don't use slides. And I know some people are very visual, so to you, I apologize, but I will repeat what needs to be repeated and say, this is a good thing to write down. I just think it's a lot nicer when you can see facial expressions and I'm able to see yours. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And if they're really timely, we'll try to address them as we go, but we'll definitely have time at the end. So I think one of the most important things to anchor first is what are the quantitative and qualitative benefits of having that unshakable sense of self? Your compensation will be higher. That's proven. Your career will accelerate faster. That is also proven. And then you're going to have more of those qualitative benefits. You're going to stamp out self-doubt, imposter syndrome. You're going to be able to be more authentic when you show up because you know who you are. You'll have more executive presence, which is really key in how you show up and how you communicate. You're going to be a lot more fearless. Your resilience will increase and you're going to enjoy what you do more. And that's really important because we spend a hell of a lot of time working. I also promised Forbes that I was going to try not to swear today because sometimes I just can't help myself. because I get so excited. So I'm going to really do my best. I do not have a good poker face. So if I get excited about a topic, you're going to know. And what I want you to leave today with is not just thinking, wow, that was inspirational, because inspiration is great, but it doesn't really get you much further than just feeling great for a short period of time. As a repeat software founder and CEO, I'm very pragmatic. Anyone who works with me can tell you that. I'm pragmatic and I'm direct. And that's how you raise money, and that's how you build and scale companies. So what I've developed and what we want to talk about today is frameworks that are equally pragmatic and straightforward that you can write down and you can start using today. I guarantee that every one of you today can go home and use at least one part of this framework and start to see really immediate results. And the goal here is that I want to show you how to identify exactly the value that you bring in any situation. And then I want to show you how to internalize it so there is no space left inside of you for self-doubt. And then I want to show you how to communicate it to the world in any situation so you can get what you want. So I want to kick off with a question, and I actually want you to write this down. So if you're a note-taking person like I am, get a pen. If you're on your laptop, open up a sticky note. But this is the question, and literally put some bullets and make a list. What do you bring to a meeting? Now, in a pre-pandemic world, or if you're still back and you're doing hybrid or you're doing in-person meetings, what do you actually physically bring with you? In a Zoom world, what's on your desk in front of you? Or what's open on your computer around you? Basically, what do you bring so that you can operate at your best and perform at your best? And I want to tell you why I ask you that question. Because as a CEO and a founder, here's my list of what I brought to meetings. And I have to tell you, the first time I actually made this list, I was a little bit horrified. So I brought business cards because that would clearly show to people in writing, incontrovertible proof, that I was the founder and the CEO, so I could establish immediate credibility, hand them all out around the room. And usually I was the youngest person in the room. I tend to look a little younger than I am anyway, and usually I was the only woman. I would also bring my laptop so that I could open it up and I could show investors a pitch deck, or customers a deck about how exciting and sexy our product was. I would also bring an iPad so I could pass it around physically around the table and say to people, here, hey, watch a demo. Take a peek at our actual product at work. Then I would bring a really nice looking executive grade moleskin notebook. We all have these because it made me look real smart. And I could take really detailed notes, right? I didn't want to miss anything. And then, of course, to write in my notebook, I had to have a pen. I am super, super particular about my pens. They have to be really inky, which means I couldn't just bring one. I had to bring 2 extras in case this one was not quite inky enough. Okay, so far, just a short little list. And then I would bring these armfuls of dongles and chargers and converters because most of the world is not, the conference rooms around the world are not set up for Macs, and we were a Mac company. So I used the word dongle way too often at that point in my career. And I had to shove all that crap. There was another word I wanted to use, but I held myself back. But I had to shove all that stuff somewhere. So I invested in a really nice leather Samsung rolling briefcase with gyrating wheels, and it looked so executive. I tell you, I just felt so good. And then I also had to bring my purse because you need stuff, right, ladies? I mean, I had to put my phone, my wallet, my sunglasses, my lip gloss, maybe some ibuprofen in case it was a stressful meeting. So I would show up with this purse, this really overstuffed, but very nice Samsung rolling briefcase. And I felt so in control and so professional. I mean, I looked like a CEO, and I was. And then one very hot August day in Austin, which is where I live and where the company was based, I took a day off. Now, I didn't take this day off to sit by the pool and just sort of like that deep breathing that Carissa just talked about. I didn't do that. No, I took a day off because I had to go see a doctor to talk about how high my cortisol levels were. because being a startup founder and CEO is not good for your health. So the one day I had taken off in like 6 years, including weekends and holidays, was to go to a doctor. And if you've ever lived in Texas or in the southern United States, you know that in August, it is really hot. And if you don't need to, you don't need to bring a purse. Everything will just melt. So the only thing I had to bring to that particular meeting was my phone, my car keys, and my driver's license. It was great. I didn't have to show up as a CEO. I was a patient. And just as a bit of a backstory, we had been partnering with Dell as a company for a couple of years. And we'd been trying to meet with this one particular VP of a business unit for almost a year. And he didn't live in the US, so it really made scheduling very difficult. And as I wrapped up the doctor's appointment, where, by the way, his advice was, what would really help you is just to decrease your stress. Thank you. I'll take a note of that and work on that tomorrow. But as I came out of his office into the waiting room, my phone had blown up. And there was urgent phone calls and emails and texts from my team at the office. And they said, oh my God, that Dell guy can finally meet with us. Yeah, I was so excited. There was a catch. He could meet with us today. He could meet with us in 45 minutes, which was exactly the amount of time it was going to take me to race up Interstate 35 to get to Dell headquarters. That meant there was no time for me to go home and get my trusty CEO briefcase and all my success stuff. And I was equally annoyed and panicked. I was annoyed because that is not a lot of notice from this guy, but that's a topic for a different keynote. I was panicked because how on earth was I going to handle this really critical meeting without my stuff? But I had no choice. My company had a culture that we had created of total empowerment. So you make decisions on your own that are good for the company. And my team had wisely decided it would be a really good idea to take this meeting. And they were already on their way to Dell. They had accepted. So I pull up to Dell, go through the guardhouse, and remember the only things I had with me: my keys, my cell phone, and my driver's license. I didn't even have any business cards with me to prove that I had the authority and the credibility to lead the meeting from our side of the conference table. And as I walked up the stairs inside the Dell headquarters, it's very cool, this double staircase, and I walked into the conference room where my team was already settled. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I'm a redhead, and so we can get maybe a little more annoyed than the average bear. So I thought, okay, that's it. And I took my keys and I threw them on the conference table and I said, we're going to flip the script today. I want you to tell me what you do. What's your mandate? What's your strategic goals? What's your work? Tell me about you. And then I'll tell you about us. But I didn't have the stuff to start like I usually did and launch in and sell the company and our technology. And I had to presume that his team had briefed him enough for him to take the meeting. I had to presume he knew I was the CEO. He could check. There was a whiteboard on the wall where we could, if we needed to, go up and answer his questions and draw out some architecture. We could follow up later with other materials if we need. And then if we needed to, we could show his team some demos over WebEx or Zoom. And the most important thing was that I had showed up. I hid my annoyance and I hid my panic. And I had presence and confidence, even without all my usual meeting crap. And the outcome of the meeting was fantastic, maybe one of our best ever. We agreed that my company was going to write and test new applications for what at the time was very cutting edge IoT technology. And then we were going to sell those applications jointly to our customers and Dell's customers. And then we used those applications to raise our next funding round. And as I got back into my boiling hot car in the August heat in the parking lot after the meeting, I thought, why had I always brought so much crap? But that's not really the word I want to say. You know what word I really want to say. Why did I always bring so much stuff with me to meetings? I clearly didn't need it. And there's a lot of layers to that answer. And I want you to look at the list you wrote down just a few minutes ago and think about, what do you bring to meetings? And I was able to realize item by item what they were solving for me. I had to prove to people that I was the CEO. I might look young, I might be a woman, but I'd founded the company. I knew what I was talking about. I could make the decisions. I had to prove as a young company that our product and our technology were real. They were working. And then, of course, I needed all those chargers and dongles and crap, because in order to show you that, I had to be able to plug into conference rooms that were not equipped for Macs. I needed my notebook and my pens to write down the great outcomes we always had. But guess what? I didn't need any of that. Not having a business card, it didn't magically undo the fact that I was the founder and the CEO. It was easy enough to just quickly look me up on LinkedIn during the meeting. We'd already won awards, innovation awards at Dell, so it was already on their internal systems. Not having my laptop and my iPad, it didn't undo the fact that we had a working, cutting-edge product that already had a dozen granted patents. And I didn't even need to write anything down, because we agreed to follow up by email and figure out what was next. And I realized that the less I brought with me, the more we focused on the so what of the meeting. And I want you to write these two words down: so what. The more we could focus, the less stuff that was around me, distraction, armor, the more we were actually able to get done. My presence and my confidence and my ability to just wing it in a meeting said a lot more than a 16-point cardstock piece of paper that people just toss out after a meeting. And not spending my time writing everything down, it actually gave me the time to look and listen and really closely observe the body language of what was happening. I could be really present. I didn't have to prove that I belonged with all my stuff, because I belonged. And so that impromptu meeting, which originally gave me heartburn, it ended up being really transformational. I showed up. I actually threw my keys onto the table. My team remembers this. And then I changed my world. So why had I felt the need for all that stuff before? And if you have a long list on your what do you bring to meetings list, why? If it comes remotely from a place of self-doubt or having to prove yourself, you're not alone. And I know there's a lot of men here today, and some of the statistics I'm going to give you are about women, but I work 50-50 with men and women, and this is equally applicable. So I just want to say this is an equal opportunity keynote. I just want to make that disclaimer right now. But the statistics are veered a little bit more towards women. So yes, if you have ever felt self-doubt, you're not alone. I speak to thousands of leaders every year, thousands, in different ways: keynotes, coaching, workshops, conferences. And 75% of women leaders in particular experience imposter syndrome. But 90% of all leaders tell me that they experience self-doubt on a regular basis. That is really dangerous. And I want to dive into why. Where does self-doubt come from? But first, let's just talk a little bit about, why is this so problematic? Basically, why are we even having this keynote? Beyond making you feel lousy and impacting your resilience, when you don't have that really strong, shakable confidence, when you can't answer that question, why you, or so what, no one is going to answer it for you. And when that answer is not provided, you're not going to get hired. You're not going to get promoted. Your compensation is not going to get appropriately adjusted. People won't accept your authority, your credibility. They're not going to listen to you. And one of the biggest implications of this If you can't answer why me, why you, is that a vacuum will form. And I'm not going to suggest you read, what is that Stephen Hawking book? Origins of the Universe, whatever that is. I tried, thought I was smart, realized I was not actually that smart when I read the first 2 pages, but he talks about black holes. And vacuums and black holes, they eat and suck in everything around them. And that is the same when there's a vacuum about self-doubt. And what happens is we rush to fill them. So every single day when I speak to leaders, if there's that tiny little crack, that tiny little vacuum starting, here's what starts to rush in. Well, the usual: imposter syndrome, self-doubt, second guessing yourself, not being intentional about your career, not feeling like you earn it, deserve to negotiate for yourself, your resilience. We throw those terms around. It's some imposter syndrome. There are very measurable implications. And one of those is momentum versus intention. So if I say to you, tell me, does momentum sound like a good thing? Most people go, yeah, I think so. I mean, when you've probably heard it a million times with your teams, right? Oh, this project has great momentum. That's awesome. But I want you to put momentum to the side when it comes to you and your career, because momentum and intention are as far apart as they can get on a spectrum. And here's some statistics to show you what I mean. 80% of women did not plan to become a CEO. They were literally tapped on the shoulder. Someone leaned in and said, we think you might be pretty good at this. You want to give it a try? 75% of women who are serving on their first board didn't actively plan to pursue that particular opportunity. It just came their way. Now, I've had people complain and say to me, Tessa, come on. I mean, how's that so bad? At least we're increasing representation where it matters. Yes, I will give you that. But what I won't give you is this. If you let momentum move your career forwards, you are not being intentional, and you're missing out on a lot of very important frameworks and fundamentals. You're not skilling yourself in the right way. You're not building up the right skills. You're not building up the right network, mentors, sponsors. You're not learning how to negotiate, advocate. Momentum is passive, but intention is how you win. Here's another very real implication. When you don't seal up that vacuum of self-doubt, you will make a ton less money over your career. So 70% of women just take the first offer that they receive. That number's not that different from men, by the way. With men, it's more like 55 to 60%. But that's still a big difference, right? But listen to this fact very, very, very carefully. Women who negotiate can make up to $1 million more over their careers. $1 million by negotiating. So let's talk later about what do you need to negotiate. I want to tell you a story, and I don't know if she's here. So all stories have had their names changed. So if you think you recognize yourself in one of these, it might be you. I just changed the name. So I was working really closely with an amazing woman named Mira. And we had decided it was time for her to get her first public company CXO role. So we did the work I'm going to show you, the framework. We figured out what value she brings. She had a great narrative about her leadership style, her values. We practiced for interviews. I mean, she kicked ass. And she got an offer from a great company. And whenever my clients get offers, I always make sure that we bring in a compensation expert because I want to make sure that it's competitive. And it wasn't. It was half of what it should have been for that C-level role at a public company with that revenue. And when the comp expert and I told Mira that, she said, you know what? It's okay. I think we should just take it. I don't have a good poker face. You never want to play poker with me. My inside voices are always on the outside. And so she knew immediately that I did not like that answer from her. But she said, wait, here's why. You told me, Tissa, that I'm being intentional in my career. I'm planning my career arc. It's a good move for me to be a public company CXO. And I don't want to risk losing this offer. But I asked her a couple questions. Okay, if they pay you half of what the market should be paying you, are they going to expect half the value and work from you? No. Okay. Just because it's your first time at a public company in this role, does that mean you deserve to be paid half? No. So we went back and we very calmly and factually presented the data. We didn't defend it. We just said, look, we've done the research, here it is. And we didn't just increase her comp package to market. We negotiated it to 2.5 times the original. And these kind of results happen over and over and over again. In the first quarter of this year, I doubled compensation for 10 of my clients because we know exactly what value they bring and we know how to communicate it. And there's no doubt about it. So I want to walk through this framework with you. And to lead into it, remember I told you at the beginning, the scenarios. Imagine that somebody says, I want you to be in a book. And in this case, the book was mine. I have a book coming out called No Permission Required. And it touches on all these same topics. And one of my CEO clients, Margaret, she had a really interesting career. She kept very successfully sort of turning around these struggling companies, getting them ready to scale. She's a turnaround CEO. And she did it in all these different industries. And I thought, hey, let's figure out your how. Let's figure out your so what. There's something really special about what you're doing. And so we crafted this powerful statement for her. And it took her breath away because of how much it resonated with her. And then she called me back later that day after I sent her the proof for the book. And she said, and this is a quote from her, "This is the most accurate and powerful thing I have ever read about myself. But I can't say it out loud. I cannot bring myself to say it out loud. And I'm not comfortable with you using it in the book." And I have to tell you, that didn't surprise me because I see it every single day. I work with leaders who have amazing, amazing accomplishments. It's right there in black and white on their resumes. But talking about it, agreeing, feeling it, internalizing it, that's the hard part. So I developed a framework that I call the 3 I's. And this is where if I had slides, you would see it. So I'm just going to use my fingers. 3 I's. Very simple, very straightforward. And they're even alliterative. So get out your pen. It's so easy. First I, identify. What value do you bring? Why does it matter? This answers the question, why you? And we're going to dive into each of these in excruciating detail. Second I, identify. This is where you really learn to believe it and eliminate that self-doubt. And then the third I is inform. This is where you inform your stakeholders so that everybody knows. And each I is equally important. I guess in a way it's like a triangle, but there isn't one on the top. So it's not a triangle. Forget that. Basically, they are equally important. If you can't identify why you're not going to get hired, not going to get promoted, you're not going to get compensated, and you are going to start veering dangerously towards that vacuum of self-doubt. And if you can't internalize your value, the second I, that vacuum is going to open up even further. Look at Margaret. She couldn't bear to put out into the world something that was true. And then number 3, if you can't inform people about your value, no one will know. And all your hard work, all your value, all your talents will be wasted. We've already talked a little bit about the implications for that, including your career career progression, your compensation. And I have to just say that right now that, I told you I doubled comp for 10 women this year, but this works. The same framework, I've used it with women and we're looking for C-suite positions or board positions. The first quarter of this year was a powerhouse for my company. We got nearly a dozen women on public boards, twice that many on private boards, and we did it because every single one of us, we went through together the work of the 3 I's. And it creates that unshakable sense of self. Then they do the work to internalize it, and then they communicate the hell out of it. And that's what I want to teach you how to do. So let's start with the first one, identify. When I ask leaders, and it doesn't matter here if it's men or women, hey, what question do you dread the most in an interview or in a networking event? It's almost unanimous that this is the question. So tell me about yourself. Who are you? And I totally get it. It's amorphous. It puts you on the spot, doesn't give you a lot of context, and you want to make a really great and memorable first impression. And as an aside, and I think she's here today, I think I saw her, so you're going to know who I'm talking about. In one of my recent leadership workshops, someone else said, you know, another question I dread is one that was recently asked to me. And the head of the nominating and governance committee of a public board said to me in an interview, if you were a kitchen appliance, what would you be and why? Well, I was not prepared for that one. I've been prepared for my tell me about yourself question. And I have to tell you, we all kind of had a good laugh about that and agreed it probably came in as a close second. But what's really interesting is if you can answer the tell me about yourself question, you can really come up with some good strategies even for those odd curveball questions. Like, what kitchen appliance would you be? Because you can really figure out, well, what's behind that question? So let's really think, what do I mean when I say identify your value? Remember, the most important thing when somebody meets you is to immediately understand why you and why not somebody else. And in the thousands of people that I talk to every year and see their resumes and hear the answers to this question, there's a trend. What I hear the most often is, here's what I do and here's how I do it. What, how. And it makes a lot of sense that that's how we answer the question, because that's what we do all day, right? It takes up most of our brain space and our time. But what we don't take the time to do is to think about, okay, so what? Why am I doing those things? What is it in service to? And I want to give you a couple really crisp examples so it's really digestible for you. You can see what I mean. So I have a client, Kathleen, and she's a really successful chief customer officer at a SaaS company. And when she first introduced herself to me, she said, I delight customers with customer care programs. I think my face gave away my inside thoughts. It really does that a lot. Because I said, I know delight is important. I know customer delight is a really big thing, but that doesn't really make me care about why you. So I asked her to think about this question, and I ask you to think about this question. What happens in a boardroom? Because that's where decisions are made. That's where they decide to have a head count for this person or to hire you or not hire you. I mean, it eventually all rolls up there. Has any board member ever said, what we really need around here is a little bit more customer delight? No. Because that's not actually the problem that they're solving for. So I asked Kathleen what I consider, they sound like stupid questions coming from me when we do this first I, but just listen to this and see what I mean, because I want you to do this when you go home and you look at this framework, or you're at home and you're looking at this framework. Okay, Kathleen, what happens when a customer is delighted? Well, they come back, they buy more, or they renew. Great. Okay, sounds like a stupid question number 2. What happens when they come back and they buy more or they renew? Well, we have recurring revenue. Excellent. We're still not done. What sounds like a stupid question number 3? Kathleen, what's so great about recurring revenue? Why do we care? Well, it's a lot higher margin. It's way more efficient and profitable. It is way more expensive to get a new customer than to keep a customer. Okay, we're almost there. I'm almost done asking stupid questions, I promise. what happens then? Now you have higher margin revenue that's really efficient. So what? Well, as a public company, good for our stock price and our valuation. Now I can finally breathe out and stop asking what sound like stupid questions. And I said, Kathleen, can we just front load with that? Can you introduce yourself by saying, I help SaaS companies increase high margin revenue, stock prices, and valuation by ensuring customer satisfaction through customer programs. Do you see the difference? Suddenly, when I have somebody meet Kathleen, they immediately understand, well, that's why you matter. That's why I'd hire you. Everybody wants higher margin revenue and a higher stock price. Let's front load with that value. Here's another really tangible example. I don't know why this is the sign for tangible for me, but it is. This is tangible and digestible. Example number 2, digital transformation. I speak to and I work with a lot of technology executives, so CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, and most of them lead and tell me that their value is that they spearhead digital transformation. And then that's kind of where they stop. And again, I say to them, let's think about the boardroom. Let me ask you those stupid questions. Has any board member ever said, some digital transformation would be so fantastic right about now? No. What they're going to say in the boardroom is, well, what problems are we having? What are our challenges in the organization? Do we need to secure this enterprise a little bit better? Do we have to get to market with our products faster? Are we just not innovating quickly enough? Those are the problems they're solving in the boardroom, and digital transformation, depending on how you point it as a lightsaber, is how you can solve that. So we flip the script on it. And now instead of saying, I do digital transformation, that's your how, that's your what. What do you do it in service to? So front load with that. Tell me that I have made, or I make companies markedly more safe or secure by creating digital transformation strategies. I help companies get products to market way faster than their competitors, which increases revenue. And I do that through digital transformation. And suddenly, these leaders are speaking strategically about their outcomes. And I'm going to remember, why you? I think again, I can't see everybody, but I think some of you are here who were at this event, which was really interesting. It was this gathering of remarkable pharmaceutical executives, biopharma, things like that. And when we were going around the room, the Zoom, doing interviews, one woman spoke for 3.5 minutes, and we're going to talk about that next. And in the last 10 seconds, when people had already kind of stopped listening, she casually mentioned that she had created $2 billion drugs. And that's like a holy grail in pharmaceutical. You want to get to the $1 billion, the blockbuster drugs. And I said to her, why did you bury that? We were all asleep. I mean, to be really frank, nobody was listening at that point anymore. It was just too long. And we're going to work on that. But why don't you start with that? To be a leader that has created 2 blockbuster $1 billion drugs, I want to know more. So I want you to lead with the why you. So people ask me all the time, I think I've sold them on this. And then they say, well, okay, how can I do this myself? So you told me that this first I is called identify. I want to go home. I want to get a piece of paper and a glass of wine, and I want to try it for myself. So think about what I would call the reporter questions. Ask yourself questions. Who do you help? What are they trying to accomplish? How do you help them? And that's usually when we stop, right? What do you do? How do you do it? Keep going. Why does it matter? What are the outcomes? What would happen if you didn't do it? If we just pulled you out of there, they never put somebody in that role, what would happen to the company? So each of those reporter questions, we then say, so what? So what? So what? I don't know how many of you have kids, and I don't know how many of them are still young, but you know that toddlers like to say why, until finally the answer is just because I said so. Think about the same thing here, but instead of why, you be the toddler and you say, so what? So what? So what? So what? Until there are no more questions that can be asked or answered. And then what you have done is you have completed the first I. You've identified your so what, the why you. And you've done something also equally important, which is a really key executive skill. You have identified your own signal in the noise of your career. And being able to do that and then say it in a really short, succinct, and compelling way, it broadcasts a lot about you and about what it would be like to work with you. We'll get into that in the third I. You might have noticed that I didn't use the word superpower here anywhere. And I think it's because the word superpower makes my face do this. It's not really helpful. It's a trend lately. And when a lot of people say, this is my superpower, I'm still left very hungry thinking, well, so what? What does that really mean? My superpower is, I don't know. So I can tell you that in boardrooms, I spend a lot of time with boards. They don't really understand the word superpower. They don't really like it. So you don't need to go there. I do think superpower is not a bad thing to talk about if you're talking about your leadership or your values. That's how you activate your value, and that's a whole other keynote. But when you only have a very short period of time for someone to understand why you, I'm a huge fan of getting rid of the word superpower when it comes to yourself. So let's move on to the second I, which is internalize. And I want to tell you a story that will show you why this is so hard. So I was working with this incredible woman named Zin. We were preparing for some really senior interviews. And she had this really interesting background, but it was very varied. We had to create a narrative that really connected all the dots. So we did the 3 I's work, and we had this shared document back and forth. And I know exactly where I was. It was burned into my brain. I was sitting on my porch on a Sunday afternoon. I was reading our doc while my dog was unsuccessfully trying to clear my backyard of squirrels. And I see this comment pop up from Zin, and she says, Tissa, I'm not comfortable saying this about myself. Okay. So I looked to see what had she highlighted. And she had highlighted one of our sentences about her really remarkable achievements. If I tell you them, then she's pretty identifiable. So I'm just going to say it's remarkable. And I thought, okay, this is so common. So this was my reply, literally verbatim. Hey, this is a fact about you. It's a fact. What is it going to take for us to get you comfortable talking about it? Can we work on that instead of taking it out? Remember Margaret. It's the same thing. This is very, very common. If you don't believe in yourself, then why should anybody else? They're not going to believe in you for you. They're busy. But when you do believe in yourself, when you stamp out that self-doubt, when you control the narrative about yourself, the way you show up, your reputation, you can pretty much do anything. And that's why this second I is so important, internalization. So I am asked 2 questions on a weekly basis. Number 1, and this is the face usually accompanies it. Oh, it feels really arrogant to kind of walk around telling people how great I am. Okay. And number 2, okay, how do I internalize my value? So let's address that question 1, which wasn't really a question, it was more an objection. It feels so arrogant. Remember this, your value is a fact. The work we did in the first I to figure out why we didn't pull it out of thin air. We didn't pull it out of we didn't pull it out of anywhere else. It's based on data. It's based on accomplishments. It's based on deliverables. It's based on measurable value that you have created for your stakeholders. And there is nothing arrogant about stating a fact, especially in context. That's actually why the title of my next book is called Swagger, because I do think we need a little bit more of that, especially as women. Arrogance and confidence are not the same thing. So then the second question, okay, how do I internalize my value? Well, number one, remember that it's fact. And number two, just like anything else, practice it. So any of you who've been to any keynotes or anything I do, you know this fact about me. My shower and my car, they hear from me a lot. And lately my dog has been hearing from me a lot, but she's thoroughly unimpressed. But they hear my keynotes, my workshops. If I'm preparing for a podcast and I get the questions, they hear me say it out loud before any audience ever will. Because the more you practice and you hear yourself talk about yourself, your facts, the more you're going to believe it. And this is kind of interesting. I did a keynote recently in Texas, and someone in the audience said, I have a great suggestion. I like to practice affirmations. I walk around at night and I say, I'm great, I'm smart, I'm confident. Yeah, that's fine. But I want to take that up a level. To me, that's what I would, if I had a 2-year-old daughter, that's what I would have her say. It's okay to use a toddler level question in your identify. So what, so what, so what? But when it comes to internalization, take it up a level. Interview yourself. Why are you great? Why are you smart? Why are you confident? Imagine that you are being interviewed for a podcast. Imagine you are me today giving this keynote. Imagine that you are being interviewed for a stretch role that you think, there's no way I'm going to get this. Imagine you're going to go to your manager and try to justify a really big raise in your compensation. Imagine any scenario that makes sense for you, but do it out loud. Imagine the questions you're going to be asked and then say the answers over and over. That's what I do in my shower. That's what I do in my car. That's what my poor dog is sick of hearing. Because the more comfortable you get telling yourself about your value, the more comfortable you're going to get telling other people. And that leads us to the third and final I, which is inform. Because if you've done all this work, you've identified, you've internalized, it's your responsibility to control the narrative about getting it out to the world. And I want to make a very intentional distinction here between informing people about your value and having an elevator pitch. Many of you know my position on elevator pitches. 100% of leaders I speak to tell me, I've been told I should have an elevator pitch. And I hate to tell you this, that's terrible advice for several reasons. And right now, my most popular keynote and workshop is called Ditch the Pitch. And it's because it works when you get rid of it. And here's why they're so dangerous, okay? They're long, they're generic. They tend to be, on average, 3.5 minutes. A short pitch is like 90 seconds. When I do this keynote in person, I've sometimes stood at the podium, like with my watch, and stood there in silence for 90 seconds, just to show people how painful it is to do anything for that long. But I won't do that on Zoom because that's really painful. But tell me if this sounds familiar. This is kind of a generic elevator pitch, right? I'm Sarah. I do this. I previously did this, and I was at this company. And while I was there, I was reporting to this person. I have this skill. We did this couple really cool things. Oh, I forgot. Before that, I was there, and we did this. And I'm really hoping eventually to do this, which is why I do this. And I'm kind of passionate about this. I think my superpowers are that. Oh my God. If you close your eyes, you could basically be listening to the audible version of her resume. And your resume says you're what? It's the details. It's not compelling. It doesn't answer the question, why you? So what? And this might be a little bit bitchy, but I have food allergies, so I always carry an EpiPen, and I swear that elevator pitches now make me break out in hives to the point where I'm really glad I have to have this with me at all times because they are so terrible. And there's actual science behind this. It's not just me telling you, hey, when I help women and leaders get rid of pitches, we really get great results. I want to give you science. So we receive 11 million bits of information every second, but we can only effectively process 40 bits in the executive center of our brain. So that means that we absorb less than 1/10 of a percentage of the information that comes our way at any given time. And I call that cognitive load, and I talk about this a lot. We're busy. Even Twitter seems like too much sometimes, right? Look how a lot of us have moved away from email to texting, to Slack, to just make it shorter, shorter, shorter. And just think, if you're in an interview, that person that's interviewing you, they're not listening with that full 1/10 of a percentage of their executive center of their brain. They're looking at your resume. They're thinking about what they just asked you. They're thinking about what they want to ask you next. They're thinking about what you just said. They probably realized they forgot to add something to the grocery list. They can't quite remember if they were supposed to do carpool. They're trying to remember, who is it that you remind me of? It was someone in high school. There is so much crap going on in people's minds. And it's your job as the communicator to get your message across. It is not the responsibility of your listener. So what do I recommend if I want you to ditch your pitch? I was not very good. One of my old high school friends is here, so he can actually tell you about this. I was not very good in high school science or chemistry. And the only thing I remember from those courses is learning about something called catalysts. And catalysts are materials that speed up a chemical reaction. And so I want you to go from an elevator pitch to a catalyst statement. I don't want to create an actual chemical explosion, but I want you to control a reaction in everyone that you meet. So a catalyst statement is like 2 to 3 sentences max. And it should do 3 things. And this might be where slides are helpful, so I'm sorry if you're trying to write fast. I'll talk slow here. Number 1, how does somebody understand you? Why you? That's easy. Number 2, how does somebody remember you? And number 3, what action are they going to take after they meet you? And you're in control of that. So a powerful catalyst statement doesn't just explain what you do, it explains why it matters. It's like an anchor in people's minds about you. And it helps them describe you and introduce you to people. My goal with every single person I meet and work with is that someone is going to go, oh my God, you've never met Alice? I can't. How is this possible? You have to meet her. And that's based on what I've just talked to them about. And I realized it's perfect. But I can't do that unless you're anchored in my head. And so no matter what your goals are, a different role, a board role, whatever it is, controlling that is your job. And this is going to help scale you no matter what you do. Because if you're thinking that your resume is going to scale, no, it's not. No one's going to send it out. I'm sorry. But I spend 1 hour, it's carved into my calendar every day, doing introductions to people. Because I am constitutionally unable to get excited when I meet somebody and I understand them. I understand their so what. And I immediately think, oh my God, I'm so excited. I need you to meet these 3 people. Have you never met Vanessa? You have to meet her. Or what is it you're looking to do? Okay, yeah. Oh, here's 2 people you should meet. But that's not possible unless you can anchor yourself somewhere. And an elevator pitch, I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to give you a real world example. So one of my clients, Giselle, she's the CEO of a very, very large healthcare network. And she called me really excited and she said, okay, I've been invited to this really exclusive private equity event where we all have 90 seconds to give our elevator pitches, direct quote, to all the portfolio companies who are looking for board members. And I said, I'm so proud of you. That's great. We're going to do it in 20 seconds. I had a couple choice 4-letter words come back my way over the phone, then a little disbelief and a little fear. And she said, that's not possible. There's a reason they gave us 90. And I said, yeah, they gave you 90 because that's the standard, but it's not useful. So we worked together and we took what she can do, we took her value, and we put it into 20 seconds. And she kicked butt. And people still come up to her that were there and they thank her. And they said, you know what I remember about you? You were brief. It was such a nice breath of fresh air to have this short, pithy, memorable, and understandable introduction to you. And I want you to think too, remember we're in the third eye in form, about the power of words. So Judy is a client of mine. I think I forgot to change her name, but this is a really good story about her, so it's okay. She had a really unique insight after we started doing this. And she said to me, you know, an elevator pitch, think about the words. You're pitching yourself. You're selling yourself. Thinking about it more like a catalyst statement, remember the point of a catalyst is to create an outcome, is that you're controlling the outcome. You're thinking about what you want to get out of the conversation. You're shifting it. And part of stamping out self-doubt is that you never have to sell yourself. Because if this person's not the right buyer, if you will, great, doesn't reflect on you. On to the next opportunity. So a pitch is just that. You're busy selling. Remember, I took all that crap to meetings to pitch and didn't have the time to sit and actually catalyze what was actually going to happen. And think about the power of words too when you're describing yourself in general. I love words like this. I'm known for, and then you tell us. I bring the greatest value when, and then you tell us. Those are power statements, right? Because you are controlling what that person is about to hear, and you're about to tell us the truth. And think about when you're doing this in writing too. So I see thousands and thousands of resumes and bios and LinkedIn profiles every year. And remember that you have less than 1/10 of a percentage of people's actual brain attention. So don't waste it. Here's filler words. You have just such a few seconds for someone to decide, do I even want to read anymore? Do I even care about this person? So don't waste it with filler words like proven leader, 25 years success, proven results, successively senior roles. Well, no crap. If your title is whatever, you got there because you moved up. Nobody just put you there, and then you might want to say it wasn't successive. Get rid of the stuff that doesn't matter. Don't tell me in the last 10 seconds that you created $2 billion drugs. Get straight to the point. In writing too. Remember cognitive load. Front load your value. Don't tell me what you do. Don't tell me how you do it. Tell me so what. The rest of those documents can be used for the what and the how. Remember in that meeting at Dell? He could look me up. He could see that I was real, that I looked like my picture, I wasn't an imposter. He could go and see that we had patents. He could go and see that we were working with other people at Dell. Your LinkedIn, your materials are just that stamp of reality on the facts about you. So don't let people get lost in trying to figure it out. And I want to tell you a story to show you again how powerful this third eye is. Remember that first imagine scenario I told you about, being fired by a very celebrity CEO? One of my clients, Brenda, came to me about 3 weeks after, and it was a doozy. It was public, it was unexpected, nothing to do with her performance, just egos, big egos. Very, very celebrity guy. And she said, you know, it's not so much that I was fired. It happens. I know I can get another job. But I feel like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, because every single day, people want to know, what happened? What happened? What happened? Tell me the story. What happened? Ooh, that sounds awful. Tell me. And there was 2 really big issues that came out of that. The first is that she'd had this 25-year amazing career, and it was this much of a part of it. And yet it took up like 100% of her mind space. So we had to invert that. And the second is that it took away from the time in interviews and in networking that she could have been talking about her actual value. And she said, I think it's hopeless. It's hopeless. I said, it's totally not hopeless. Let me introduce you to this framework. So we did it. We did the 3 I's. And then we created a really kick-ass narrative. And so she would start every conversation, interview recruiters, hiring managers, whatever. Hey, you're probably curious about what happened with CEO X. Here's the story in 15 seconds. Now, let's talk about the value I bring to this role. She'd dive right in. Or if she was in a networking situation, she would say, now let's talk about the kind of role I'm looking for. You tell me what you've been doing. How can I help you? And some people are assholes. I promised I wouldn't swear, but it's true. Some people really are. And they would push and they would say, it wasn't enough detail. I wanted to know more. But she'd really internalized that value. And she said, I told you the story. I gave you the details. We don't need to go into it any further. Let's go back to why we're really here. And she could talk about her catalyst statement. She could talk about her value. It was transformative. We got her an amazing role in 2 weeks. So when you control your narrative and you control how you inform the world about your value, you control a lot of other things too. And we talked a little bit about the qualitative and the quantitative benefits, but let's just kind of loop back to those, because really the title of this keynote is how to accelerate your career by learning these things. So there's a lot of quantitative measurements. That's easy, right? You know that when you know your value, you internalize it and you inform people about it, you can increase your compensation. People who negotiate make more. You'll be more comfortable negotiating. Look at Mira. We got her to 2.5 times her initial offer. I had a client recently who left a full-time role to do some consulting, and she sent me the proposal just to peek at. And I said, this looks good. I think you should double it. Not because we're being greedy, but because you've figured out the value that this consulting work is going to bring. You're an executive. You've created massive market value. Don't undersell yourself. So she did. They accepted it. And after just 1 month of consulting, they're having some serious conversations about bringing her on full time. So you really know how to position your value a lot more accurately. And you're also going to increase the rate at which you're promoted. So one of my clients had a 50% increase in compensation and was the only person in her whole org to receive a promotion in the first half of the year. And she mostly did that because she really focused on the 3rd I. And she just up-leveled her conversations. She'd been really focused on what she did. And now she was really talking in these executive level meetings as a fairly junior person about the so what and the strategic outcomes. That's big, fast career acceleration. Some other quantitative things. How many people do you manage? How big are your teams? How are you scoring on your KPIs and your reviews? So when you know your value, you can really see in a measurable way how it's going to come back to you. But on the qualitative side, it's kind of hard. I've had clients call and say, okay, the offer's twice what we thought it would be. Great. But it's hard for somebody to call or text me and say, Tessa, since we started working together, my confidence is 60% higher. It's a really hard thing to quantify, that sense of self. But when you've done that 3 I's work, you're going to have the confidence to state your value using those power words. You're going to have the catalyst statement that really intentionally controls how you want people to understand and take action. It'll be a lot easier for you to ace interviews and land stretch roles. So I'll give you another example. I worked with this great founder, Carrie, a few months ago to prepare for a CEO interview. And a few weeks later, I happened to be having lunch with the chairperson of that company. And she didn't know that we worked together. And she said, we just hired this new CEO. And here is what's so interesting. When she met with the whole board for the first time, we asked her that dreaded question, tell us about yourself. Why you for this role? And she said, Carrie was incredibly succinct and compelling and confident in that answer. And that is what got her the role. So I felt really excited calling Carrie after that lunch and saying, by the way, you kicked butt with how you put that out in the world. And also, you're going to really, in a qualitative way, boost your sense of confidence and presence. And people ask me about executive presence all the time. Do you remember I told you about somebody who threw up into garbage cans and then purses if there was none available? She used to buy her purses, I kid you not, in bulk at Target. And her manager actually is the one who sent her to me. And she said, look, she's so high potential, but this problem, we have to overcome it. She's brilliant. We know her first eye. We know the value, but we've got to get through that second eye and then the third one. So she's comfortable speaking extemporaneously and just showing up. So we did the work. And this is to this date, this is one of my favorite texts, although I got lots of favorites. I just got a picture of this beautiful, gorgeous designer purse. And she said, I will never throw up into this bag. That was a really fun day. I have a lot of fun days, but that was a really fun day. It would have been more fun if she said, and I bought you a purse too, but well, it didn't happen. But so if you're one of the 90% of leaders who have self-doubt, just don't feel hard on yourself. Look at all these amazing people I've told you about who it happens to. And remember that if you can really do some of this work, and this is not super challenging work, it's just thinking about yourself in a different way. It's a pragmatic approach. I want you to reach a point where you're fearless. This is another framework, but without slides, I didn't want to get too much. You will really become fearless. You'll be able to be your authentic self. You'll be very resilient, and you'll be very effective. And so before we go to the questions, I just want to leave you with one more question, which is, what are you going to take to your next meeting? Look at the list you wrote. Think of my long list of success stuff. And in the end, I didn't need anything from it, right? Just show up. Throw your car keys on the table. You have everything else you need to be successful, and it's already inside of you. Thanks so much.
All right. If anybody has any questions for Tissa and would like to throw them in the chat or even raise your hand or unmute yourself to share, we'd love to have some time for Q&A before we start our roundtables.
I'll be really sad if there's no questions, just FYI. Or just thoughts. Have you ever used this in your life, or is there a time where this could have been helpful?
Looks like we have a question from Asya, and she said, can you explain more about what you have done to overcome imposter syndrome?
Yeah, Asya, do you mean for myself or just in general with people?
So I want to know your personal story of imposter syndrome, because I've done a whole research study on this for my dissertation, but I'm always curious to know, because you talked about imposter syndrome, like what did you do personally to work on overcoming it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what's interesting, and maybe I'm lucky, I'm a redhead and I was kind of born literally with my arm up in the air, like, here I am, watch out. So I've always had a lot of just in your faceness. So I think I've been able to hide some of that early on in my career. But what was really interesting, and I talk about this, and I think it's important to also be comfortable talking about failure, is that my last company failed in a major way. And it was really, I had felt so great. You know, I had raised money, I had done these amazing partnerships, I had amazing customers, we had patents, and then we had to shut the company down. And I think what it did is, rather than maybe make me feel like an imposter, it made me think, well, what's my actual value here, right? Why did this happen? And does this mean that I need to rethink everything I'm going to do from now on? And I clearly did go in a slightly different direction. I never want to raise money again. But I think that the biggest thing about imposter syndrome is actually a shift, that meeting shift. So when I show up at a meeting, even after that, even today, and I don't bring anything with me, I don't write anything down, I don't usually I won't answer the first questions. I don't try to prove to people who I am. I think that's really important. Even in an interview, a great interview technique is to, if somebody asks you that first question, that dreaded question, hey, tell me about yourself, turn it around. I'd be happy to. What I'd really love to hear about is, let's say it's for a board role. Tell me, really what you're looking for in this candidate. What problems are you looking to solve? Where's the company going? So what you're doing is you're immediately, number one, showing that you can ask smart questions. Number two, you're showing that you're gaining a little bit of control in the conversation, but you're getting context around you. It's the same thing in a networking event. I always have people say to me, well, I got a lot of value. Sometimes it's hard to get the so what really crisp. Okay, fair enough. So then don't be the first person to introduce yourself. In a networking event, go up and say, hey, dreaded question, tell me about yourself. Now you have context to understand who is that person, what might they be interested in. And you'll realize that you're not an imposter because there's something about you that is interesting or potentially synergistic or parallel. So taking control of a conversation, but I think honestly, the biggest thing, and I text this to my clients all the time, come in, throw your keys on the table and realize, what do you really need to bring with you? I had a chief investment officer client who didn't believe me, so I challenged her. And she texted me after the meeting and she said, I did what you said. I didn't bring anything with me. I didn't bring business cards. I didn't even introduce myself. And everyone was tripping all over themselves to tell me who they were, what they did, and then find out why I was there. And it's powerful. There's power in confidence. So I think that's the best way. And talk to your shower, talk to your car, talk to your dog. The more you talk about yourself, the easier it gets. It doesn't feel weird.
That's a great answer. Looks like we have a couple other questions too. How do you get past self-doubt?
Alicia, I think I'm going to sort of say that's very similar to the question about imposter syndrome, but I think a lot of that work is asking yourself, what is it that you're doubting? Is it your ability to show up? Is it your ability to perform? Is it your, how is that doubt manifesting and around what topic? And then I think it's a lot easier for you to do things like some of that framework and that work and realize that you can really do that internalization. So it's pretty similar to the imposter syndrome question. I love that. I don't want to mispronounce your name. Is it Sabila? I love your question about how did my client overcome her anxiety so she could treat herself to a designer purse. This one's interesting. It's actually a whole different keynote, but I will give you a sneak peek. So essentially, the first one was to I think do some of that work, right, of internalization and getting over self-doubt. But there's some really straightforward communications techniques that you can use, because what she was particularly afraid of was when somebody would say, they would call on her and she wasn't prepared. So I think I just did a keynote on this yesterday, or a presentation on this yesterday. So really important is the top sort of effective executive communication techniques. And I'd say there's probably like 3 that we could talk about really fast. The first is to answer the question and then explain. We tend to get asked a question and then we kind of throw up all over the place with content while our listener is going, is she saying yes? Is she saying no? Is she, what? So again, control the cognitive load, the understanding. If someone says, I don't know, would you be able to come in and lead this DEI initiative? Yes. here's why. No, here's why. So answer and then explain. The second one is pausing, because I think a lot of times we just have this innate human tendency to jump in. Oh, I like this one from Gwen. I'm going there next. So if somebody asks you a question or it's your turn to speak, pause. There's a lot of power in a pause. I don't mean 90 seconds where it looks like you've had a matrix glitch. A little bit of a pause. It gives you time to think about, what are they really asking? What are the politics in this room? Just pause. And then commit to a number. This is my favorite, and I think this one probably helped her the most, and it's helped a number of my clients. So if you are a little bit nervous about speaking extemporaneously, or being put on the spot, or you think, God, I tend to ramble, tell people how many things you're about to say. And I get this, people say to me, but what if I don't know? Best number in the world is 3. There's attention science, 3. And it's great in fairy tales too. There's always 3 princes, 3 frogs, whatever. 3 is really good in our brains, right? So say to somebody, they ask you a question, or they say, hey, what do you think? Should we buy this company? I don't know. It doesn't matter what the topic is. Answer, then explain. Yes. Here's 3 reasons why. 1, say it. 2, say it. 3, say it. Actually say the numbers. You're leading somebody cognitively. They're going to be able to easily follow you. They also know that you're not going to just ramble until somebody needs to cut you off. Which really, I think, leads to Gwen's question, which is, how do you gain control in a high-level conversation with a person who's really aggressive and overtalks? I think we literally talked about this yesterday on the webinar. And so this is a very common problem. If it's an in-person meeting, I'm a big fan of using a disruptor, your hand, something, their name, catch their attention. Misty, I'm calling you out just because, but Misty, thank you. But rather than be aggressive about it, there's some really great ways, even on Zoom. Disrupt them cognitively. Misty, you've said a lot of things that are really interesting and important. Can we just recap them? So I want to make sure I understand them and that I properly absorbed them. And then you could repeat it back to them, and then you now have the mic and you can shift it. So rather than sort of saying, Misty, you've been talking nonsense, God, stop. You're disrupting them with your voice, maybe your hand, but you're also saying, hey, what you just said was great, even if frankly it was total uselessness. Let me just repeat it back, make sure we got it, and then use that as a segue into getting back on track. Vanessa, what are your weaknesses? That is a really, really good question. And I really love the interview prep stuff. I think that you should practice. We do this in some of my courses. We literally write down the questions that we hate. So maybe it's not just about weaknesses. Maybe it's just the ones you just don't like the kitchen appliance question. But practice the ones that you don't like. And think about, this is a really strong communications technique. You don't have to answer the question that you're asked. We tend to be very literal. Someone asks you a question, so you say, what are my weaknesses? Well, here they are. Well, what about flipping it? What's really behind that question? What are your weaknesses and what are your strengths? What's to stop you from saying, my strengths are this? That leaves a few areas like 1, 2, 3. And I've really solved for that by whatever. So the first thing you're putting in their head is not my weaknesses. You're acknowledging that weaknesses are the opposites of strengths. Works really well. And if somebody asks you a question you don't want to answer, don't answer it. And if they push and they push, maybe they're an asshole and you don't want to work there. Sorry, Misty, I'm sorry, but it's true, right? Think about Brenda. And if we had a few people who they just wanted to know, they wanted to know the story. Tell me about him. I've heard he's on. And finally, I said to her, why are you still having a conversation with this company? Clearly, they don't listen. They don't engage in a conversation. They're not interested in you and your value. This story is sexier to them than you are. And that's why a pause is helpful, because you can stop and think, okay, what's really behind this question? So what question am I really answering? Don't do it in a slimy way like a politician does, where they pivot and just answer whatever. Do it in a confident way. But I feel free, on my website, I have some of these courses where we really dive in, and I think practicing it with, so it's not rehearsed, it doesn't sound like a pitch, but it sounds really natural, and it just sounds like you're comfortable talking about it in any situation. How do you know when to stop responding to a question? Yeah, Farouz, I think this is a great example. You know, he says, I tend to go over and sometimes I feel like I'm giving out more than the question. This is a great example of that commit to a number. Because if you know this tends to be maybe a weakness of yours, then just say, you know, I love that question. I'd like to address it in 3 ways. And so sometimes people will say, but what if as I'm doing it, I come up with this brilliant 4th? Well, if it's so brilliant that it's going to make or break the job, then you can say, oh, there's actually a 4th. But if not, it gives you a great opportunity to follow up later in an email. Hey, I was also thinking, here's some other things we could consider or talk about. If you know that about yourself, try to commit to a number. It really works. So if I could also just say, if I'm so passionate about this, and I hope that this really helps you develop that sense of self, because there is no way to quantifiably say my self-doubt has decreased by 76%, but I can see it when it happens. And then the outcomes are really, really tangible. And if I can help you in any way, please reach out. Love to do courses, or if you need a speaker. This is just, as you can see, it's my mission and I love it. So thanks for coming.
Tissa, thank you so much for your time and your energy and your passion for your work today. We're so grateful to have you with our audience members. And we look forward to partnering with you in the future. Feel free to connect with Tissa on LinkedIn, on her website. She has tons of amazing resources and courses so that you can continue connecting with her even after the summit today. Thank you again, Tissa.